Welcome back to the Jungle Fever podcast. I'm Ethan Sargent. Aid Crowley is alongside me, as always, and we made it, ladies and gentlemen. We made it to the NFL season. We are mere hours away from kickoff in the season itself, which will start on Thursday. We're recording this on Tuesday, and then the Bengals got to wait a few more days. They get going on Sunday, 1 o'clock against those dang elves from up in Cleveland. It's always a great way to start the season with a team you dislike heavily and with a rival in the AFC North. And well, with the way the Bengals have started seasons recently, they will need to be at the top of their game, even against a team that maybe might not be as talented as them on paper. They will have to be playing their best football if they want to shatter a couple of the narratives that maybe surround the Bengals as they head into the 2025 season. Before we get into our big breakdowns of what we're expecting in this matchup and what we're looking for in 2025's season opener, we have to talk about, it's not quite breaking news now, but I think we recorded our episode last Monday, what, about 12:30, 1 o'clock on the
Yep.
East. And I think about 2, 3 hours later, the news broke that Trey Hendrickson was re-signing with the Cincinnati Bengals. So we finally, I think for the first time all offseason, got mistimed with how we did our shows. But
Called my
Trey
shot.
Hendrickson, yeah, yeah, you win some, you lose some. Trey Hendrickson takes an interesting approach, I think is the best way to put it, I guess. Obviously, most people were expecting a standard extension or maybe who knows. But at the end of the day, the Bengals end up basically the long story short is they just kind of threw last contract that he had out the window. And they re-signed him to a 1 year, $30 million extension, if you want to call it that, which essentially just kicks the can down the road a little bit. But it does pay Trey Hendrickson much closer, maybe not quite what he's worth, but much closer to what he is worth in terms of value on a per year basis, right? Just a $30 million gets, almost a $15 million pay bump for what he would have made under his last contract. And at the end of the day, this was what Trey Hendrickson said in his press conference and what he's kind of talked about. I just think Trey Hendrickson wants to play football. I think that was kind of what happened here. I don't really, it seemed pretty clear to me that the Bengals were very firm on this, no guarantees after the first or after the second year, which was, it's kind of seems like it was the sticking point. I think the money was there. I think they offered Trey Hendrickson. I think the rumor or the reporting is that there was an offer in place for about a 3 year, $96 million extension, which would have, been right in line with some of the best edge rushers in the game. But it was that hang up of the guaranteed money that we've talked about a lot over the last couple of shows. And at the end of the day, I think, again, that's a guy that just wants to go out there and play football. And I think that is kind of what was on Trey Hendrickson's mind when he signed something like this as well. Let's just forget all this talk for 6 months until it's a story again. And let's just play football. And Trey Hendrickson is going to play football, and he's going to play in week 1, which is a big deal for the Bengals.
Yeah, absolutely. This was always something that I thought was going to get done, but this deal in particular just feels like both sides are just like, screw it, I'm done with this. Let's just get it over with. That's kind of the vibe that I got from this deal. And apparently, Trey Hendrickson said that this type of deal, a 1 year extension, wasn't on the table before. The Bengals kind of approached him and made it seem like this is an option that they can go down during that weekend before he signed on that Monday. And that's what they landed on. In my opinion, I think it's just a situation where the Bengals, they needed him on the field. Trey wanted to be on the field. This is the best way they can do it. They can do the 1 year thing and then probably just end up going their separate ways after. That's the kind of vibe that I get. I mean, they have an opportunity to franchise tag him. It becomes much more expensive, obviously, because now his base pay is in the 30 million range. But I don't see a future with Trey Hendrickson on this team just based off of how the recent contract negotiations went and then this deal that they ultimately landed on. Now we'll wait and see how this season goes, but yeah, that's just the kind of vibe I got. Ethan, you had a visceral.
No, so it was a technical glitch. Not
Oh,
everything you
okay.
said was I 100% agree with. There was a
Yeah.
little audio glitch. I'm not
Okay,
sure if it'll
okay,
come up
okay.
in the
I
recording or
was like,
not,
I
but
don't think
we'll.
what I'm saying is a hot take.
No, no,
I
I
just,
think you're very right.
yeah,
I'm actually
I
just
I
no.
just think
Go
they go
ahead,
their
because
separate ways.
I'm click clacking on my phone here, trying to find an important number. Um, Edge rusher franchise tag number for
Which is this, I mean,
2026. It
while you
is.
do that, I'll just preface it with this. This would be the most Bengals thing to do of all time. Would be like, all right, you know what? We're not
It
messing with
already it
it's just
already kind of feels like something that's
you know
gonna
what,
happen.
Trey? Franchise tag. Like, oh my gosh, I would lose
So
my
I
mind.
will say, so last year's defensive end franchise tag was $22 million. That number's going to go way up. I think it could be in the $30 million range. And then I think there's some other clause with Trey Hendrickson and with the edge rusher deals is that I think that number's going to be higher.
So I just found it.
Please.
It would be about $36 million to franchise tag
Yes, that's the number I was
in
thinking about.
in 26, which is hefty.
It is. And look, we'll see how Trey Hendrickson plays this year. If it's anything like last year, it could be in the Bengals' mind where that it was already kind of telegraphed that it kind of feels like something we're going to be talking about on this show and hopefully after a Super Bowl championship in February, right? And if that's the story after the Super Bowl championship, sure, right? I wouldn't really care. But
Okay.
I do think that will be a story, and I think it's a real possibility. I think that is a distinct possibility, and in that case, I do not think you would get to a situation that they had with T. Higgins, where I think if they franchise tag him, it would be, let's say he plays on it tentatively. It would be that would be his age. This is his age 31 season. Next year is his age 32 season. At that point, he'd be turning 33 years old. Who knows what his production looks like over the next 2 seasons? I don't think the Bengals would sign him. You're basically at that point you would do a 2 year extension, and then some people were intrigued to see if there would be a no tag clause because you can have those. Some people were looking to see if that was going to be put in this deal. It is not. So again, the franchise tag is a distinct possibility for Trey Hendrickson in 2026. And I'm going to stop talking about his contract for the next 5 months because I've had enough of it.
Last thing I'll say on it. They did it kicking and screaming, but the Bengals did it. They did it. The whole
It
talk of the
took it took
it was a
every
lot more
muscle
painful.
fiber being shredded
Yeah.
apart. It took
But I mean, Joe
the
Burrow was
blood being
laughed.
drained.
Joe Burrow was laughed off the stage when he was on First Take. When he first introduced the idea of yes, we can keep Jamar T and Trey all together. Stephen A. Smith and those guys literally laughed at him. Here we are, and they're all on the
Yep,
team. This is
yep.
Joe's team. This is who he wanted. So now he's got to
And
go.
Mike too. He asked for Mike Gesicki back. Got him
Yep.
back.
So listen,
So yeah.
for as much, crap as we give the Bengals front office and as painful as it was, it's done. They
I
got their guy.
think really quickly, the last, I guess, off-season thing we will do. Now that we are truly out of the off-season and we have seen everything from the draft to free agency, we also they picked up the defensive tackle that formerly of the Chiefs, Pennell, who is a guy former Super Bowl champion. So very good depth to get at this point in the off-season. A guy who has a lot of experience inside. So they pick him up.
Right.
They also obviously do eventually get the deal done with Dalton Risner, which we talked about last week. It took again kind of kicking and screaming, but they did get a deal done with Risner. And again, he'll be a big part of that offensive line equation. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the game preview in a second. But let's grade this offseason. A plus to F minus, right? I'll let you go first. But I think now that we are truly in the last part of the offseason and we are a few days away from a game, give the Bengals offseason a grade A through F.
Hmm. Um, I would probably land. It's just we talked about it earlier before, like the Jamar and T stuff, like automatically kind of push it forward a little bit,
Absolutely.
because
Yep.
those are two guys that you lock down for the long term. So that's doing heavy lifting when I say I would give it probably like a C plus. Um, that's probably where I would land. I don't think that they did enough defensively. I think they completely mishandled the Trey Hendrickson situation. That is a huge miss, I think, on their part. But I think the Jamar signing, I think the T signing are both probably A minus to A signings. The only reason why they're not A plus is because they weren't done sooner and they could have been done a little cheaper. So I would probably land around a C plus. They did what I think they needed to as far as addressing, getting more depth on the offensive line with the Reisner signing. I still think that there's more that can be done on that defensive line, but here we are. So that's where I would land. What about you?
Um, See again, I'm a little bit more optimistic than Aiden. If you've been listening to the show for the last, however many weeks, you'll probably have noticed that by now. I'm gonna give it a B plus. Because I don't think people give them enough credit for doing that, right? The we did it that we just talked about, right? I think a lot of people around the NFL did not expect that to happen. I think a lot of people expected, oh, they will cheap out. And yeah, they kind of did in some aspects of it. But at the end of the day, like we just talked about, Jamar is back. T is back. Both of those guys for 4+ years, which is beyond exciting for Bengals football. Joe Burrow is in town for the next 4+ years, right? Trey Hendrickson's around for this year, right? And that's a big deal for what this team's trying to do, especially on the defensive side of the football. Um, Mike Gesicki is back. In terms of what they've done in the draft, obviously you cannot grade any of these players yet because none of them have seen a game. But Shamar Stewart, since that's thankfully in our rearview mirror, he has been pretty good in camp. He is, I think, a guy that's going to have a big role on this team in 2025. Um, Dylan Fairchild has received rave reviews so far from everybody on that offensive line staff. So is Jalen Rivers, to be fair. Maybe not quite as high reviews, but again, for a guy who's come in as a fifth round rookie, he's got a lot of good publicity. Taj Brooks in the sixth round, both the linebackers, have had their ups and downs as well. But again, both of those guys are expected to contribute as well. So that was again when we first broke down this draft class, I kind of said the biggest theme of it for me was that they're getting guys who I think, whether you agree with the picks or not, I think you're getting guys that they're going to play a lot in 2025. And they need that. They needed the injection of youth. They needed that. So again, we'll see how they perform. But when you look at it that way, I think that that's fine. And then again, like I agree with Ayden absolutely on the defensive side. I do think there was a bit more that they could have done to shore up that side of the football, and it may well come back to bite them. And that's probably why it doesn't get into the A's for me. But I think with everything that they did with retaining some of the best talent in the NFL, it does deserve some credit, even though, again, like Ayden just said, it was done kicking, screaming, whining, complaining the worst way possible. So, again, that's where I'm at, and I think any grade in the B's I think is fair. Even if you want to grade it in the C's, I think it's also fair. If you want to grade it in the A's because you're that happy everybody's back, I can see that too.
Yeah,
But I don't think you can give this offseason a failing grade simply because of what they did in terms of bringing the talent back
I
and
agree.
getting those guys back. So enough with the offseason, enough with money, enough with contracts. Let's just play some dang football. That's what they're gonna do on Sunday at 1 o'clock p.m. up on the banks of Lake Erie against the Cleveland Browns. First off, I hate this team, Cleveland. I really like beating the crap out of them. The Bengals have done that actually the last couple of years. The Bengals have not lost to Cleveland since week 1 of 2023, that infamous Joe Burrow calf game. That's the last time the Bengals lost to Cleveland. It might not seem like that the way that fan base talks on social media, but it is. So the Bengals have won 3 in a row against the Browns. Last year they swept them. They beat them late in the year. Both games against Cleveland were really
Ugly.
ugly last year. The first game was obviously Deshaun Watson tears his Achilles early in that football game. Dorian Thompson-Robinson comes in and looks like me if I was an NFL quarterback. Um, James Winston comes in late in that game and plays pretty well. I don't know why he didn't play, whatever. But the Bengals, again, played defensively well in both games against Cleveland last year. Joe Burrow had a couple touchdown passes to T. Higgins over the course of those games. I think the big keys to this game, and that's where we'll start off here. Let's start with the offensive side of the football for Joe Burrow and company, right? I think it's got to be about you have to maintain and establish rhythm early in this game, right? Obviously, with all the troubles that they've had with getting out of the blocks, and it's well publicized. You need to just sustain some drives. I would love on the first drive of the game if they could just pick up a couple of first downs and get the ball rolling. it would just take a weight off, I think, for a lot of Bengals fans. They'll see, all right, this team's ready to go, right? And they obviously put a lot of emphasis and effort into that early in this training camp and throughout this offseason. We saw it in preseason. Joe Burrow looked pretty dang good in the preseason. So again, you got to establish that offensive flow early, and you don't want to let this Cleveland team dominate you in the trenches because I think, that's Cleveland's path to victory in this game, plain and simple. At the skill positions, Cleveland isn't even close to competing with this team. Where they can come close to the Bengals is inside. They've got one of the best edge rushers in the game in Myles Garrett. They've got a fresh, fancy new toy on the inside named Mason Graham, who's got the potential to wreck this game if the Bengals aren't careful. So I think that's what they need to do on the offensive side of the football. Ayden, what about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think this game is just going to be decided with who wins inside. And I know that's so cliche, and you could probably say that about pretty much any football game ever. But I think in this case, especially given the Bengals' struggles there, I think that's where it's going to come down to, especially because Dan Pitcher hasn't even named a starting right guard yet. He says he's still not sure. He did make it clear that whoever is in at right guard week one, whether it's Reisner, whether it's Patrick, whether it is randomly Rivers, which I don't expect, but if it's one of those three guys, they're going to stay there for a while. But you already know Cleveland is game planning to attack that position in particular and line Garrett up there and make their lives miserable. That's their goal. And
Yeah.
that's again, like you mentioned, their path to victory is just making that uncomfortable. But I think another part of this game, if the Bengals can somehow try to establish the run game, I think that's going to open up a wealth of options for them. I know that there's been talk here recently about Dan Pitcher completely overhauling the run scheme just to fit Chase Brown, which sounds very encouraging for us Chase Brown and believers.
Love the guy. Love the guy.
Exactly, exactly. I'm not worried about Joe Burrow. I'm not worried about Jamar. I'm not worried about T. I'm not. I'm not. I think we can score with these guys. It's just a matter of if they're going to have time, if they can establish the run, take a little bit of pressure off of them, and then of course, what happens on the other side of the ball. I think you've got to be able to get to Joe Flacco. I mean, he's what, 41? Is he 41 or is he 40? Well, he's one of the two. But not mobile at all. You got to put pressure on him. You got to make him uncomfortable because if he can sit back there and dissect this Bengals secondary, he can
Yeah.
sling it still. Like
Yeah.
he is very capable of picking part of defense given the time, and especially against I think a weak Bengals secondary. I don't care
Yeah.
who the receivers are if you just give them time. I mean, David Njoku might eat on Sunday.
Yeah.
You got to get to him. You got to get
They
to
have to, again, I think you have to keep things in front of you, right? And again, it was a struggle for the Bengals last year to limit the big plays, right? They allowed a lot of them. I think, again, you've got a lot of, we talked about this all offseason, you've got a lot of young guys in the secondary with a boatload of things to prove. You got Cam Taylor-Britt in a contract year. You got Dax Hill, who just got, the Bengals kind of signed off on him when they gave him that fifth-year option pickup, but he's got a ton to prove. The injuries have held him back. DJ Turner, another one. He had a very up and down camp. A lot of these guys have a lot to prove, and the Bengals have invested a lot of capital in trying to fix this secondary. And eventually it's got to pay due, right? You need to find something and some sort of balance in that back end. Keep an eye on Geno Stone throughout this week. It's still kind of up in the air if he's going to play. There really hasn't been much movement on it yet. I don't know if he will play, which would be a tough loss for the Bengals secondary. It would probably force Tyson Anderson to come in. Again, a guy I think is pretty good, but he's primarily been a special teams player throughout his NFL career. So it would be a big step up for Tyson Anderson if he gets a start at, starting safety in week number one. Jordan Battle, another one that just has to play better in those stretches. So yeah, the secondary has a lot to prove. When you look at Cleveland's weapons, obviously Jerry Jeudy is pretty clearly, I think, the pick of the lot of their receivers. You've got Cedric Tillman in there as well, a couple other, half decent players. Nobody that could really compete with, what the Bengals have on the offensive side of the football. But, Jerry Jeudy was third in the NFL in receiving yards last year. So, I think keeping an eye on him. I wonder how they will track Jerry Jeudy. Will they keep the Bengals did this a couple times last year where they kept Cam Taylor-Britt typically on a specific receiver. We'll see if they track Jerry Jeudy throughout the game or if they kind of pass him off under different assignments. And then, yeah, I think pressure is the key. If they get home on Joe Flacco, the Bengals win this game by 3 or 4 scores. I don't think there's a Browns fan that would argue with you on that because I think if the Bengals can limit what the Browns do offensively, they're going to score. Right? It's a Browns secondary, by the way. We didn't talk
That,
about this. Browns
yeah,
secondary that is super young, super raw. Martin
thin.
Emerson's out for the year, I believe.
Yeah, thin.
Greg Newsome's just bad. And I mean Denzel Ward is holding
Denzel
it
Ward's a
together.
baller. He's a
Denzel
baller.
Ward is, oh, he's a great football player, but he's holding it together by a thread.
Right.
That's about it in terms of what they have talent-wise in that secondary. Two young safeties. It's attackable is maybe the kind way to put it.
No
So
JOK,
again,
no JOK, which I think is a huge loss for Cleveland.
tough. Yeah, you're going to
Yeah,
expect a rookie Carson Schweisinger to come in and probably get a lot of those snaps out of UCLA. Good football player. But I think, again, when you ask a rookie to play early, there's a lot that you have to learn right out of the jump for Cleveland. Obviously, I think the big key for them up front, right? Both sides of the football. They've got an offensive line that was really bad last year. Remember a couple of years ago, this was one of the best units in the NFL. And really through age and kind of neglect, really, they have just regressed really to one of the worst. They struggled a lot last year to keep whichever quarterback was back there afloat, whether it was Watson, Winston, Thompson, Robinson, whoever they threw back there. And we'll see how many quarterbacks play for them this year. But they struggled to keep
yeah.
quarterbacks up. They were graded as one of the worst lines in football. So again, they've got some new pieces there. They've got guys coming back like DeJuan Jones. They've got, some grizzled veterans, guys like Wyatt Teller who have just been there for ages and we're part of some of the best lines in the NFL. But now, again, that's a big unit of emphasis for them in 2025. And they're obviously going to have to keep close eye on Trey Hendrickson, but I think it could be key. Could one of those young edge rushers step up? Miles Murphy, big year for him. Looking at you. Joseph Osai, prove it year. Looking at him, right? Shamar Stewart, does he play much? Does he come off the bench? How do they use him? So the Bengals defensive line is also a key unit in this game because if they can get pressure, like I just said, I think if they can get pressure and they can make things difficult, this game will get ugly. I think the Bengals can make this game ugly. And when you look at it, again, we don't play the games on paper. You play this game on paper should be a Bengals cruise win. They're
That's
so much better on paper.
that's
But
exactly
this is
what I
week
wanted to say.
one,
Yep.
and this is Cleveland, and it's in Cleveland.
Yep.
It's never easy.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to say. These are two teams that I think have very different outlooks for their season. I think Cleveland is a team that might be pushing for the first overall pick. If not, let's just say a high overall draft pick. I don't think any Cleveland fans would really disagree with you in that sentiment. And the Bengals they view themselves as a playoff team. Now, if you're a playoff team, you got to beat up on the bad teams. You just have to, straight up. You have to go out there and do your thing. Now, that's never the case with this Cleveland team, just because I think they match up so poorly in the trenches, and that's why these games are closer than they should be. And so that's why year in and year out, we always walk into this Cleveland game and we're like, oh, we'll be fine. And even the games we win, we don't feel great about winning them.
Mm.
Last year, I know we swept the Browns, but it didn't feel good. Like those games that we won, like we
I mean,
won.
that the second game, well, the one in Cincinnati, which was flexed out of prime time because both teams weren't in the playoff race. Um, I mean, it was just ugly. I mean, Joe Burrow threw the touchdown basically from his knees. That was really the only highlight of the game. The Bengals had that one they should have had to pick where like three guys tried to catch it at once and it dropped away, and it kind of summed up what the Bengals have been doing defensively all year. So I think again, the big thing, you cannot let this turn into a rock fight. You cannot let this become a game where say
17
it's
to 10.
14 to 7 in the third quarter and they're just hanging around and all of a sudden, there's the big play to Jerry Jeudy and you're tied, right? That's what they cannot let happen. You need to put your foot on the gas early. If you see a jugular, if you see a chance to go at them and take them out, you have to take advantage. Let's say you get a turnover and you're up two scores, you have to finish that drive. I think if the Bengals can put this team away, they will. The problem is that's a lot easier said than done, and especially for this team in week one, where it's like they turn into the 2008 Lions when they play in week one. Like, you have to they have to have that killer instinct this week.
Yep.
Because again, I will restate it. They are miles better than Cleveland on paper. I don't think there are many Browns fans that would disagree with you. But because
Yep.
they're on the road, because they're in a tough environment, a place they've struggled to win a lot of the time, and they're playing against a team that's going to, probably going to be Cleveland's best crowd all year because if they're as bad as I think they're going to be, there are not going to be many fans there late in the season. It's going to be loud, right? Dog pound is going to be feisty, and you have to silence that. You have to come out. You gotta, an opening drive touchdown would do so much good for this team because not only would it give that offense that confidence, right, and that feel back, but it would also give you that impetus and drive on defense, right? And you say, all right, we got a lead to defend. And I think also an underrated kind of storyline this year is that there are no big week one storylines. The last couple of years, think back to what the Bengals have had to deal with in the lead ups to their games, right? 2024, Jamar Chase is dealing with this hold-in nonsense. Didn't start practicing until the Thursday of game week. Then T. Higgins gets hurt in the walkthrough. So they're basically down. They lost their second best receiver, and their best receiver didn't really know the game plan. So obviously the offense really struggled against the Patriots week one last year. 2 years ago, same scenario. Bengals were up in Cleveland week one. Not only was the weather awful in this game, but Joe Burrow was dealing with the soft tissue injury. He was dealing with the strained calf, did not look nearly like himself. The Bengals put up 3 points at a loss. You know, it all goes back to that, sort of ideology of, you know, there is no storyline. The Bengals are, with the exception of Geno Stone, and I'm knock on wood, relatively healthy, right? They have they have kind of stayed in their own building this offseason. They didn't do any joint practices. I don't know if anybody noticed that. They did no joint practices with any other team, right? Yes, they played their preseason games, but I just think they're focused on themselves.
Mhm.
And they kind of have to be, right? They know, everybody knows the narratives, right? And I think Zach Taylor also, this is an important thing to note before we actually get the season rolling. The pressure is 100,000% on Zach Taylor.
Yeah.
That seat, right now it's lukewarm, right? If they don't make the playoffs this year, that seat becomes scalding hot very quickly. In fact, it may blow him off.
I
So
was gonna say, yep.
you, you,
I think with
it's
Joe
win or
Burrow as
die.
yep.
It's
I
win
think
or
with Joe
die.
Burrow as your quarterback, if he missed the playoffs 3 straight years with one of, if not the best quarterback in the league, I don't think you have a
It's win or
chance.
die. It's win or die.
Um,
Plain and
I will
simple.
say one of the last things I'll say about this game, and I kind of touched on it a tiny bit, but I do think the David Njoku matchup scares me a little bit. I think
Hmm.
that's something that this Browns team can exploit early and often. He's an athletic freak. He's kind of a matchup nightmare, and especially his connection between him and Joe Flacco, I think will be really strong. We saw it when they made that playoff push a couple years ago, that those two linked up a ton. I don't know who gets that assignment on the Bengals team. I don't
I
know if
would
it's
actually
Knox.
imagine,
I
I
don't
think
know.
Knight
I don't know if
probably
it's going
gets
to
a lot
be,
of it.
yeah, Knight or maybe Wilson. Because Wilson's supposed to be a little bit better in coverage. We'll see at his age and everything. But yeah, exactly. So I think that's something that I think Cleveland's going to try to exploit a little bit, and that's kind of the one part of their offense that scares me a little bit. I'm interested to see how Dylan Sampson looks on that side. He's somebody
Yeah,
with
and that's an
loose, a
underrated
little bit of a
story as
different,
well with
yeah,
Judkins. Is he going
yeah.
to play?
Yeah, a little bit of a different style of running back that I think Cleveland's used to. They're used to kind of more of those ground and pound guys like Nick Chubb. Um,
Hmm.
Jerome Ford kind of fits that profile, obviously not as good. Dylan Sampson's a kind of complete 180 from that, a little bit of a smaller, quicker, more explosive guy. So those two players in particular, I'm kind of like, keying our eye on
I think Ford
besides
starts the game if I
I
had to
agree. I
guess.
agree.
Yeah,
I agree. But
former UC player.
I think a good change of pace back like Dylan Sampson can be an X factor in this game.
Yep,
Jared Judy's obviously going to be circled. Miles Garrett, Mason Graham. I was just trying to get some lesser known guys that could potentially pop
sure.
in a game like
Yeah.
this.
Again, and I mentioned him earlier. I think another big key to this game is Carson Schweisinger. With no JOK for this season for Cleveland, you're putting a second round rookie in early, and so far, from what I've read, the reviews have been pretty good for him so far in Cleveland. He's probably going to have a lot of different things that he's tasked with doing in this game, whether that's slowing down Chase Brown, whether that's potentially covering a Mike Gesicki out of the backfield or in the slot. will be interesting to see. Also, keep an eye on Mike Gesicki. I mean, he's been dealing with some injuries as well. I imagine he'll play. He was kind of just tentatively held out of a lot of those preseason games, but I think he's cool. He did practice yesterday, so I do think Mike Gesicki will be fine. I think Stone is the biggest injury concern right now for the Bengals. Keep an eye on him. We'll see how he goes. In terms of the old betting lines. Right now, the Bengals are -5.5, according to DraftKings. 47.5 is the total over under total. And the money line right now has the Bengals -238. Cleveland would net you a +195 bet. So, last thing we will do, as we'll probably do every single week, give me a score line in this matchup. Can the Bengals break their week 1 demons and get off to a 1-0 start?
Yeah, I'm obviously going to side. I think this is a game that the Bengals win. I think they have a point to prove. And I think they take care of business. I think the offense looks good. I'm confident with where this team's at. You mentioned the lack of injuries this offseason. I think that's been huge. Knock on wood, that stays the case throughout the whole season. This is the healthiest that they've been. This is the most together that they've been. This is the most people that they've brought back. With all that being said, I think Cincinnati walks away with a win. I'm going to say, let's go, let's go 31. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, we'll go 31 to 24.
Okay.
Bengals win.
Yeah, this could get me in trouble. I hope it doesn't, but this could get me in trouble. I think the Bengals blow the Browns off the park.
I
Um,
hope you're right.
I just think this team, with the way that they've played offensively, the way that I think that they've set themselves up throughout this offseason, I think that they're just going to explode. I think they're going to win this game like 38-17. I think that they're just going to put up way too many points. And yeah, they'll probably give up a few yards. They'll probably give up. This game could be like 17-10 at halftime, and you're still biting your nails. You're still like, oh well, they might come back. But I think they'll get a key turnover or two out of Joe Flacco because he's had some issues with that in the past. And I think that they'll just be able to. Again, we haven't really talked about much defense. I don't think we've seen any of Al Golden's concepts yet. Like I don't think we've even seen anything close to what he really wants to do at the NFL level. And yeah, a lot of people are panicking about that because they look terrible against backups, which is a valid reason to be complaining about. And we talked about that a couple episodes ago, but I don't think we've really seen what he truly wants to do. We'll see that a little bit in week 1. I think they'll be a little bit better than people expect. Not quite. Again, they're not going to be the best defense in the NFL. They don't have to be. They're probably going to be one of the best offenses in the NFL. So,
Yeah. I'm going to
in that
revise my
aspect,
pick. I'm going to revise my pick. I'm going back. I'm just going to say 31-21. I'm going to drop it a little
okay.
bit. We win
Take a
by
field
by
goal
two
off.
scores.
Maybe
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
Browns have had some major issues at kicker. They got a new kicker in the building.
Yep.
Dustin Hopkins is awful. So I like that. The missed field goal. I like that. That's a good
31-21. There we
tweak.
go.
Yeah, I'm gonna go 38-17. I think that they're just gonna have too much offensively for what the Browns are gonna try to do defensively. And I think that the Bengals are going to win. I think the Bengals are going to win, and I think they'll pull away in the second half. I think they'll have too much for Cleveland. Hopefully, the Bengals can do that. Hopefully, they can get off to a 1-0 start. But Aiden and I both going for the Bengals in week number 1. Football gets going properly on Thursday. Eagles and Cowboys getting the season underway. How about that Micah Parsons trade, by the way? Huge one right out of the jump. We'll see if he plays for the Packers against the Lions. We'll keep an eye on the rest of the division as well. The Ravens got a big matchup in week number 1. They're taking on the Buffalo Bills. Sunday Night Football. Josh Allen versus Lamar Jackson should be a fun matchup. And then Aaron Rodgers gets to go up against his old team for Pittsburgh, taking on the New York Jets and Justin Fields, who was formerly in Pittsburgh. But that'll do it for this edition of the Jungle Fever podcast. I'm Ethan Sargent, Aiden Crowley saying so long. Hopefully, we're talking to you next week with a 1-0 Bengals team. We'll see you then. Have a good one, guys.